First of all, you need to understand something about this family. From the outside, they seemed normal. The kind you look at and think, they aren't rich, but they live well. A simple house, a used car in the garage, family lunch on Sundays, laughs that seem sincere. But on the inside, there was something even more valuable. Trust. The father always said, "We might not have much, but the little we have is clean, and it is ours." And for years, it was like that. Every achievement was earned through hard work. Every improvement to the house took months, sometimes years. Nothing came easy, but everything had value. Mark grew up in this environment, the eldest son, the example, the father's silent pride. While his siblings were still trying to figure out life, Mark was already working, already helping with the bills, already carrying a weight that no one asked for, but that he took on anyway. And maybe that was it, where it all began. Because without noticing, Mark started to believe in a dangerous idea, that he needed to do more, that what he was doing still wasn't enough. Even being the best son, the most responsible, the most reliable, still, inside of him, there was a constant sense of debt, as if he needed to prove something, as if one day he had to change everything at once. And it was exactly this need, this silent desire to fix everyone's life, that opened the door to the greatest mistake in that family's history. Because one day, without warning, without planning, an opportunity appeared, and it seemed too perfect to be ignored. But what Mark didn't know is that at that moment, he wasn't facing an opportunity. He was facing a trap, and the worst part? He didn't realize it. The proposal appeared simply, almost innocently. It wasn't in an office or in a formal meeting. It was on his phone. A message, an old contact, someone Mark had seen before, but never paid much attention to. "Man, I'm getting into a business here, quick money, no bureaucracy. I thought it was just your style." Mark ignored it at first. He wasn't impulsive. He never was. But the message stayed there, sitting, waiting. And the next day, another one came. A screenshot, high values, gains in a few days. On the third day, an audio. The voice on the other side sounded secure, confident, almost too exciting. I also doubted it at first, but after I got in, my life turned around. This is an opportunity, Mark. It's not for everyone. And that's when something changed. It wasn't greed. It wasn't despair. It was curiosity, that silent curiosity that starts small, but grows fast. Mark started researching. He went to the website, saw testimonials, ordinary people, saying they were changing their lives. Some stories even seemed like his, simple people who just wanted a chance. And for the first time, that old idea came back with force. What if this is it? What if this is the opportunity I've been waiting for? He thought of his father. The bills, the years of effort without getting anywhere. He thought about how everything could change fast, without suffering, without delay, just one decision. But still, something was strange, something that didn't fit. A light feeling, almost imperceptible, that it was too good to be true. And for a moment, he almost gave up, almost closed it all, almost deleted the conversation. But then came the message that changed everything. Whoever gets in now doubles their money in 7 days. 7 days, not 7 years, not 7 months, 7 days. And in that instant, the doubt lost its strength. Logic began to quiet down, and emotion began to speak louder, because when time seems short, pressure increases, and when pressure increases, people make mistakes. Mark took a deep breath, looked around. The simple house, the old furniture, the routine that never changed. And he made a decision that, in a few days, wouldn't just change his life, but would destroy everything that family took years to build. The decision was made, but the hardest part was still missing. The money. Mark didn't have that amount available. It wasn't a small amount. It was practically everything the family had saved. Years of effort. Savings made little by little, kept with care, almost like a symbol of security. It was the kind of money you don't touch, not without a reason, and especially not without telling anyone. Mark knew that. He knew that if he told them, his father would never allow it. His mother would be desperate, his siblings would question it, and maybe, deep down, he didn't have enough answers either. So he did something he had never done before. He decided to hide it. In the first few minutes, it seemed impossible. His heart racing, his mind trying to justify. It's just this once. I'll tell them later. When the money comes back, no one will complain. And so, convincing himself bit by bit, the mistake started to seem acceptable. Mark accessed the account. Each click felt heavier than the last. The balance there, sitting, intact, reliable. It represented years of his father's work, sacrifices that no one saw, simple dreams, but important ones. And even so, he transferred it. All of it. Without warning, without a guarantee, without a way back. The moment the money left the account, a strange silence took over. There was no more going back. What was once just an idea was now real. Mark stood still, looking at the screen, waiting to feel something. Fear, regret, guilt. But no. What he felt was hope. A strong hope, almost euphoric. Because in his head, that wasn't a mistake. It was a necessary risk. It was the step no one had the courage to take. It was the beginning of the change. And for a few hours, maybe even a few days, he really believed in it. But there is something about wrong decisions. They almost always can start out looking right, and that is exactly what makes everything even more dangerous. Because when reality starts to appear, it's already too late. And in Mark's case, the first sign that something was wrong came faster than he imagined. On the first day, nothing happened. And that was expected. Mark even felt calm. After all, the promised return was in 7 days. He decided not to think too much. He followed the routine, tried to act normally, as if nothing had changed. But it had. And he knew it. On the second day, curiosity began to pinch. He entered the platform, and there it was. The balance, higher. Not much, but it was growth. Small, but real. And at that moment, something dangerous happened. Relief. That feeling that maybe I'm right. On the third day, the value was visibly higher. Now it could no longer be ignored. Mark started smiling to himself. He started to imagine the moment he would tell the family. He thought of his father's face, the surprise, the pride. He thought of his mother, finally at peace, without worrying about bills. He thought of his siblings, with more opportunities, more comfort. Everything was starting to make sense. Or at least, it seemed so. On the fourth day, the growth was even faster. Too fast, and even so, Mark didn't suspect. On the contrary, he started to believe he had made the best choice of his life. That old feeling, that he needed to prove something, was now being replaced by a new one. I did it. But there is a detail that few people notice in these moments. When something grows too fast, without a clear explanation, usually it isn't growth. It's preparation. Preparation for the fall, and the fifth day came differently. Mark entered the platform as always. But this time, something didn't seem normal. The site took longer to load. The information was confusing. Some numbers didn't add up. Nothing too obvious, but enough to be bothersome. He tried to ignore it. He thought it could be instability, some temporary error. But that feeling, that same one he ignored at the beginning, came back, stronger, heavier, harder to ignore. And for the first time since it all began, Mark didn't feel hope. He felt fear. And in the background, deep down, a question began to emerge. What if I've made a mistake? But it wasn't the worst yet, because what would come the next day would leave no room for doubt. On the 6th day, Mark woke up earlier than usual. It wasn't out of discipline or commitment. It was anxiety. Something inside him told him he needed to check, as if the answer were waiting for him. He grabbed his phone while still in bed, took a deep breath, and entered the platform. Loading, loading, loading. It took longer than usual. Much longer. His heart started to race. It wasn't just impatience. It was a premonition. When it finally opened, the balance was still there, but something had changed. The numbers were frozen. They didn't update. They didn't grow. Nothing happened. Mark frowned. He refreshed the page. Once, twice, 5 times. Nothing. He tried to access another area of the site. Some functions simply didn't respond. And then, he saw it. A small message, almost hidden. System under maintenance. Return later. Maintenance. A simple word. But at that moment, it felt too heavy. Mark tried to calm down. It's normal. Platforms do this. It's no problem. But his mind wouldn't obey. He left the site, entered again, tried to make contact. He sent a message to the man who had presented the opportunity. Seen. No response. He sent another, and another, and another. Nothing. The silence started to scream. Hours passed, and that maintenance didn't end. Mark could no longer focus on anything. With every minute, the sense of control vanished, and in its place came something much worse. Despair. At the end of the day, he tried to access it again. And this time, the site didn't open. It simply vanished. As if it had never existed. The link didn't work. Support didn't respond. The contact disappeared. Everything. All at once. Without warning. Without explanation. Without a chance to recover. Mark stood staring at the screen. Paralyzed. Trying to understand. Trying to deny. Trying to find any sign that this wasn't real. But it was. The money was gone, and along with it, the only thing that still supported that decision, hope. Now, there was no more doubt. There was no more time. There was no more way out. Only one thing remained. To tell, and face the consequences. But how do you explain that you lost everything? How do you look into your family's eyes and say it was you? Mark knew that moment would come. He just didn't imagine it would be so fast, and even less, that the impact would be so devastating. Because losing the money wouldn't be the worst part. The worst part was yet to come. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. He lay down, closed his eyes, but his mind wouldn't stop. Every scene came back like a movie. The message, the first click, the transfer, everything, repeating, endlessly. And the more he thought, the clearer one truth became. There was no more way to hide it. The money wasn't coming back. The platform wasn't going to reappear. Silence wasn't going to solve anything. It was a matter of time until someone noticed. Maybe the father while checking the account. Maybe the mother, needing something. Maybe a small detail that would trigger everything. And the more he postponed it, the worse it got. But even so, Mark tried to buy time. The next day, he avoided the family. Short answers, distant gaze, anything to not raise suspicions. But those who lived together, Notice. The mother was the first. A mother feels it, they say. And on that day, she felt it. Is everything okay, son? A simple question, but it weighed more than any accusation. Mark froze. For a second, he almost told her, almost let it all out, almost put an end to that weight. But he couldn't. It is. I'm just tired. A lie. The first of many. And maybe, one of the worst parts of all this wasn't the mistake, but what came after it. The lies, the distancing, the silence. Because the error destroys a part, but the lie destroys what could still be saved. The days started to get strange, the father quieter, the mother observing more, the siblings sensing the atmosphere. Something was wrong, and even without knowing exactly what, the house started to change. The lightness was gone, conversations decreased, the environment became heavy, and Mark, carrying it all alone, started to crumble inside, until the inevitable happened. On an ordinary afternoon, without warning, the father decided to check the account, and at that moment, it all came to light. No preparation, no control, no way back. Because some truths, when they appear, don't give you time to hide. And what that family was going to discover wasn't just the loss of money. It was the breaking of something much deeper. The afternoon was silent. Nothing out of the ordinary, at least, until that moment. Mark's father sat at the table, took his phone, and opened the bank app. It was routine. Check. Organize. Ensure everything was in place. It had always been like that. But on that day, it wasn't. He looked at the balance once, frowned, looked again, logged out, logged in again, as if the error were on the screen. Not in reality. But it wasn't an error. The money, simply, wasn't there. Not partially, not reduced. Zeroed out. A cold void. Direct, impossible to ignore. His heart raced, his breathing changed, and without thinking twice, he called out, "Mark." The voice wasn't loud, but it had something different. Something that made Mark's body freeze instantly. He knew. Before arriving, before hearing any question, he already knew. The steps to the living room felt longer than ever. Every second, heavier. Every breath, harder. When he entered, he saw his father with the phone in hand. Gaze fixed. Serious. Different from anything he had ever seen. Did you touch the money? Direct. No beating around the bush. No room to run. Mark opened his mouth, but no words came. The silence answered for him, and in that instant, everything collapsed. "Mark, what did you do?" The voice now carried something worse than anger, disappointment, and it wasn't just about the money. It was about trust. It was about everything that amount represented. Years of effort, kept with care, protected with discipline, surrendered without warning. The mother appeared right after. The siblings too. And in a few seconds, they were all there, waiting for an explanation, waiting for it to make sense, but it didn't. Mark tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to justify, tried to turn the mistake into a good intention. But the more he spoke, the worse it got, because intention doesn't matter when the consequence destroys everything. Silence took over the room. No one screamed, no one argued, and somehow, that was even worse. Because sometimes, silence hurts more than any word. And at that moment, Mark realized something he had never felt before. He hadn't just lost the money. He had lost his own family's trust. And that is not easily recovered. After that moment, nothing returned to the way it was before. The house was still the same, the furniture, the rooms, the routine. But the atmosphere was different. Heavy, silent, distant. Conversations decreased drastically. The father barely spoke to Mark. The mother, Ron, tried to keep the peace in, but she didn't smile like before. The siblings avoided touching the subject, but their gaze said it all. Trust, which before was natural, now was uncomfortable. Everything had to be explained. Everything was questioned. Everything seemed fragile. And Mark began to live within that weight. Every day, he would wake up, and the first thing he felt was guilt. It was no longer about the money. It was about what he had broken. The relationship with his father, which before was of pride, turned into distance. The relationship with his mother, which before was light, turned into constant concern. And inside of him, a thought wouldn't stop repeating, "I destroyed everything." He tried to help more around the house, tried to be more present, tried to compensate in some way. But some things are not solved with immediate effort. Because trust isn't something you rebuild with quick actions. It's something that takes time. And at that moment, no one there knew how much time would be necessary. Difficulties started to appear, bills tightening, plans being postponed, small cuts in daily life. Everything that the saved money supported was now missing, and every difficulty was a silent reminder of the mistake. But the worst wasn't that yet. The worst was what started to happen inside Mark. Because when someone makes a mistake like this, there are two paths. Either the person hides or they face it. And for a few days, Mark started to hide, avoiding conversations, avoiding looks, avoiding any situation that reminded him of what happened. But running doesn't solve anything. It only prolongs. And one day, without warning, something happened, something that no one expected. And that would change again the course of that story. Because sometimes it's at the lowest point that something starts to turn. But this turn doesn't happen without pain. The days passed and slow, heavy, almost dragging. And the more time advanced, the more Mark realized that running wasn't working. The silence of the house continued. The distance from his father was still there. The pain didn't decrease. On the contrary, it only changed shape. And it was on one of those nights, when everyone had already gone to sleep, that something finally broke inside him. Mark was alone, sitting in the dark, staring at nothing. No phone, no distraction, no escape. Just him, and the weight of everything he had done. And for the first time, he stopped trying to justify himself. He stopped thinking that the intention was good. He stopped trying to ease his own conscience. And he faced the truth. He messed up. It wasn't the system. It wasn't the business. It wasn't chance. It was him. The decision was his. The silence was his. The choice was his. And it hurt. It hurt in a different way. It was no longer despair. It was awareness. And this pain is what really changes someone. That night, Mark cried. But it wasn't a cry of fear. It was the cry of someone who finally understood. And when that happens, something begins to change. The next day, for the first time since it all happened, Mark did something different. He didn't avoid it. He didn't run. He sought out his father, the same man he always tried to make proud, but who now could barely look at him. Mark approached slowly, his heart racing, words stuck in his throat. But this time, he didn't try to explain too much. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't try to justify. He just said, "I messed up." Simple, direct, no excuses. And maybe, for the first time, true. His father stayed in silence. He looked at him for a few seconds, as if he were trying to decide something. And then he answered. but not with anger, nor with shouting, with something Mark didn't expect. Truth, and those words would mark that moment forever. The father took a deep breath. His gaze still carried pain, disappointment, but now it had something different: fatigue. He looked at Mark, not like before, not like the son who never messed up, but as someone who had finally understood the weight of his own choices. And then he said, "The money. We recover." Mark looked up, surprised, but his father continued, "The problem was never the money." Silence. Each word seemed heavier than the last. "The problem was that you decided alone, that you hid it, that you broke something we always protected in here." Mark felt that like a blow, because it was true. It always was. The father then stood up slowly. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. More silence. But this time, it wasn't empty. It was reflection. "I'm not just angry at what you did. I'm disappointed that you didn't trust us." That was stronger than any shout could be. Because deep down, Mark knew he hadn't just lost the money. He had made a decision alone on something that was never just his. And that changed everything. But before leaving, his father said something that no one there expected. "Now, you are going to learn to rebuild, not as punishment, but as a consequence. And maybe as an opportunity." The following days weren't easy. Nothing changed suddenly. Nothing was solved with one conversation. But something began. Small, slow, almost imperceptible, but real. Mark started taking on real responsibilities. He started acting, without trying to prove anything, without seeking recognition, just doing what needed to be done. And with time, the looks started to change. Conversations returned bit by bit. The atmosphere stopped being so heavy. Trust, it still wasn't the same. And maybe it would never be exactly the same, but it was being rebuilt. And that was already a lot. Because in the end, this story was never just about money. It was about decisions, about consequences, and about something that many people only understand when it's too late. A single mistake, when it involves those you love, doesn't just change your path. It changes everyone's destiny, but it also shows that even after falling, the choice to get up can still rewrite the ending. And now the question remains, if it were you, would you have done it differently? Before you leave, stop for a moment and think about this. How many decisions in our lives do we make alone, without thinking about who might be affected? Sometimes it doesn't seem like a big deal. Sometimes it just seems like an attempt to get it right. But as you saw in this story, a single mistake can change everything. If this story made you reflect, if at some point you saw yourself in it or remembered someone, then this video has already fulfilled its purpose. Now I want to ask you for something simple. Subscribe to the channel. Because every week there are stories like this. Stories that make us open our eyes and think before making decisions that have no way back. Leave a like on this video. It helps the channel grow a lot and makes more people receive this type of content. And share it with someone. Because sometimes the story at the right moment and can prevent a mistake that would change everything. And tell me here in the comments, what would you do in Mark's place? I'll read it. See you in the next video.